The wait is over. It's finally here. Christmas Day for horse racing fans. It's Kentucky Derby Day. Let's cap the card. Salutations and welcome, friends, to a very special edition of Capping the Card. My name is Matthew DeSantis. So glad you're joining me here as we are going to run through all 14 races on the Kentucky Derby Day card, including, of course, the Grade 1 jewel of the Triple Crown, Kentucky Derby, mile and a quarter. A lot of chaos going on in that race right now in terms of who's in, who's out. We're going to get that all covered here in a second. But before we get to my special guest who's going to join me, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our content here on Trust the Profits. We got so much for you for the Kentucky Derby, but listen, it's going to keep rolling. We're going to have stuff for you for the Preakness and the Belmont over the summer in Saratoga, leading into the Breeders' Cup. It never stops here at Trust the Profits. We got all the horse racing content you need. Additionally, give us this video a like and comment below with who is your best bet on Kentucky Derby Day. And of course, you got to let us know who you like in the Run for the Roses. Well, if you're never tuned in to Capping the Card before, pretty straightforward premise. Me and a guest are going to go races 1 through 14. I'm going to give you my top pick, my top value play in all of those races. My guest is going to do the same. And here to join me today is a very special guest and someone who I would not trade anyone else for in terms of having them here with me to cap the Kentucky Derby card. And that is my very good friend, Sara Elbadwi. You know her from NYRA now, all talking horses on America's Day at the Races. Sara, thank you so much for coming on the show and capping this very special card with me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to get to chat with you. And we have a lot of races to get to for this Kentucky Derby card and a lot of drama going into the race just 2 days out before we actually run the race. And I was saying to you before we got started that hopefully this year, all of the drama can happen before the race is actually run,
Yes.
unlike the past 2 years. So if this is the end of it or close to the end of it before they get in the starting gate, that's at least a small relief, I guess, in comparison to what we've had over 2021 and 2022, as well as the pandemic in 2020 before that. So, really looking forward to diving into this card of lots of stakes action, some good allowance races, and of course, the Derby itself.
Absolutely. Some really huge names. I mean, even if you're a casual horse racing fan, absolutely huge names are littered throughout this card on the turf, on the dirt, and even let me do this as a segue in the very first race because we are going to kick things off in race number 1 with a $100,000 allowance optional claimer going 6.5 furlongs on the dirt for 3-year-olds. And the name that I'm referring to is both of our top picks, which is Extra Añejo for Steve Asmussen. Sara, you're the guest. I'll let you kick things off here in race number 1. Was this one a pretty simple single for you, or did you, kind of grapple with this one because there's a couple of other nice horses in this race?
There is, but I mean, obviously, we're going to the same horse with Extra Añejo in here, and he was just so impressive in his debut. And you have to wonder if he had stayed on track and been able to stay healthy going into his 3-year-old season, if he would be Steve Asmussen's Derby horse going in instead of Disarm, because he was impressive you and got a high buyer speed figure as well, earning a 92 in that race, going 7 furlongs. And, unfortunately, not going to get that Derby opportunity, but I think that he's just so much the horse to be in this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I mean, he's going to be on the inside rail. He's going to go, press the button and go from the start. Obviously, federal judge, the number 3 horse, is also going to be going for Rudy Brissett. This is a horse that also posted a huge speed figure first time out. But when you watch those two races, Extra Añejo just moves a little bit different and just seems like a really special horse that, like you said, could have very easily ended up on the 12th race on the card today if things had worked out a little bit differently. Now, you're going to go for a really big price in terms of value with a 20-1 shot Western Ghent. Talk to me a little bit about this Dwayne Lucas horse.
Look, he's probably not good enough, but if you look over his 12 races so far, you see names that are running in the Kentucky Derby and other stakes races on the card and have just been proven to be better horses than the majority of this field outside of Extra Añejo. I mean, you have Mo Strike, Disarm, Forte, Two Fills, Instant Coffee, Echo again, and he's kind of a pick up the pieces at a price type that I would want to use underneath in some exotics because that's what he's done in his last 2 races. He's been able to finish third at 36 to 1 and then 15 to 1 last time out. And I also don't really mind the cutback for him. He's been able to run well at this distance before, so he's one that I would want to use underneath somewhere at a big price.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to look at the number 8 Deer District, 6-1 for Dale Romans with Junior Alvarado aboard. This is a horse that's 5 for 6 in the money in his lifetime and goes back and forth between turf and dirt. Does seem like he really perked up off a pretty extensive layoff last time out. Went from November till April and then ran a really nice race, I thought, in a similar leveled race, $100,000 allowance optional claimer at Keeneland going 6 furlongs. I just think this is a second back from a long layoff. I think you're going to see a little bit more value. Here's the thing. If you are at all concerned about Extra Añejo and Federal Judge wearing each other out, presumably Deer District is going to be sitting right behind them and might just be able to benefit if there is a little bit of a pace collapse there. 6-1. If you're trying to fade the favorites, maybe you want to use this horse as a win bet. If not, he feels like a relatively safe horse to hit the exacta or trifecta in verticals. But that is how we see things in race number 1. But let's move on to the second race on the card. And that is $120,000 maiden special weight. And this is going a mile and a 16th on the dirt for 3-year-olds and up. And we have very different selections here, both in terms of our picks and value plays. But I think that speaks to just how wide open this race really feels in a lot of ways. Ultimately, my top pick is the number 6 Quaternion, a name that I actually like to say a lot. And this is a horse that I have come to get to know a little bit because this horse has run on the undercard of a lot of big days at the fairgrounds. And I think this horse is just going to be thrilled that there's not a Brad Cox monster in the race right now, because this horse always seems to run up against just absolutely stellar competition from First Defender to Bishop's Bay to First Mission. This horse has run up against excellent competition and has hit the board 2 of the 3 times out. You're getting 6-1 on the morning line. This horse, I think, is going to continue to like to get stretched out a little bit. And I think you're going to see a better effort the second time stretching out for Quaternion. You're getting a little bit of value at 6-1. Julian Leparoux aboard. I just think this is a horse that I'm not necessarily sold on some of the favorites in this race. And I think the 6 makes a lot of sense just in terms of maybe getting, dare I say, a little bit of class relief perhaps in this race and just not running up against some other big names. Also switching barns and going to Brian Lynch for the first time. Lynch isn't gangbusters on the trainer change, but does pretty average. I mean, 15-16%. So certainly not a negative move for him, but not something that you might see from a Todd Pletcher or Steve Asmussen type of barn. Interested, though, in your selection, Quality Chic for Ken McPeak.
A rhyme. And another fun name to say. And I mean, the favorite is coming out of this race as well as the horse on the outside, with the news that we've learned about with trainer Saffie Joseph Jr. no longer being able to run his horses at Churchill Downs indefinitely. So that's going to change the prices that we're going to see on a lot of these horses. And I don't really think that we're going to be getting 6-1 on this horse, but this one has been running well at Oaklawn. Ran the best race so far last time out on April 22nd. This was the first time that Luis Saez was aboard, who is staying aboard again. And this horse didn't have a perfect trip either. I mean, he broke kind of awkwardly and then was extremely wide in that race. And the winner was much closer to the pace that he ended up finishing second to. It was also his best race from a number standpoint. So I just think that he's a logical contender in here. And then for my value play with the number 5, Sir Rock, this one is one that is making his 3-year-old debut, going out for the McCarthy barn for the first time. And he's a horse that has shown speed and faded before, which isn't necessarily typically the kind of angle that I like to use, but I can always forgive a horse's first start and then second time out going on a sloppy sealed track while stretching out for the first time and fading in there. I feel like that's an effort that can also be forgiven. And so I don't know if he's any good, but they paid a decent amount for this horse, $775,000 for the son of Gunrunner. So perhaps there's some ability somewhere. And I thought that 10-1 was a fair price around that range to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, when all else fails, bet Gunrunner. So I absolutely agree with you. And I'll apologize. He is currently 15-1 on the morning line. I have that mistyped there. I have 10-1, but he is 15-1 on the morning line. So getting a little bit more value there, obviously. My value play in this one is the number 3, Harbor Bridge, 10-1 for Dallas Stewart with Flavian Pratt aboard. This is a horse that's getting a little bit of a makeover, getting the blinkers put on second time out. ran, I thought, a very professional effort in debut, ran a 70 Beyer speed figure, which is certainly comparable with where you would probably need to be in this field if you take a little bit of a step forward. Dallas Stewart's pretty good second time out, actually, at Churchill down in maiden special weights. And that's something that he actually has a decent number of, a decent end size to look at. So we're not just extrapolating off 3 or 4 cases, but he does pretty well there. Blinkers is not necessarily a big move for him, but it feels like this is a good move for this particular horse, just to be able to stay focused and run past horses rather than with them. I like that Flavian stays aboard in this particular case, son of Justify, and I think this horse should have no problem doing the distance, is going to like getting stretched out, I think, quite a bit. So I think this is a horse 10-1 with the blinkers on, should sit a little bit of a forward trip and be able to get the distance there. I like this horse to certainly be a potential win contender, but obviously like this horse also underneath in verticals. Let's move to race number 3, which is an $80,000 optional claimer going a mile for 3-year-olds and up. And this one feels a little bit more top heavy in terms of the top 2 choices. You're on the morning line favorite. I'm on the second choice. Talk to me a little about this horse from Todd Pletcher on the inside rail.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've gotten so chalky in the first 3 races of this card, but I have some better opinions later on at prices, and at least there's some value to be had underneath, so to speak. And with Bright Future, I mean, he's aptly named a winner on debut with an impressive buyer speed figure, and then his second race was on the Belmont Stakes undercard, and that was a track that a lot of people thought was playing very kindly to inside speed for the first couple of races, and whether or not you believe that that trend really carried throughout the day, it's something that I think has some merit to it, at least in the early part of the card. And he's a horse that never saw the rail that day. He was extremely wide all throughout and ended up finishing third in here, regressing a little bit numbers wise as well. So, if you buy into the idea that the rail was good and he was against the flow of the racetrack, it certainly also gives more credit to his performance last time out in his 4-year-old debut at Gulfstream, where he just ran a number that makes him absolutely the horse to beat in this field, even though this is a full field of 14 with one also eligible. I just think that he's probably the most talented one in here, and a repeat of that performance last time out just makes him a player, and I wasn't trying to get around him too much.
Logical argument. I'm always a little concerned about the inside rail, but certainly has the speed to get away, no problem from there. One of the things that I was a little concerned about was just the speed in general in this race. There's a lot of speed on the outside, like 11 through 14, all seem to really want the lead. And so I was a little worried about a potential pace meltdown. And that's what ultimately led me to the number 5, King Ottoman, 3-1 for Steve Asmussen with Jose Ortiz aboard. This is a horse that was actually, running in the Indiana Derby, the West Virginia Derby, the Oklahoma Derby last year. Pretty good horse, and 5 for 8 hitting the board with 2 wins in his career. Had a long layoff from September to March, came back in a high level allowance race at Oaklawn Park, got a really easy win coming from off the pace that day. And I thought that was a really nice effort to see coming off from such a long layoff. And also the buyer speed figure was almost right there with where he was prior to the layoff. So I would hope to see a little bit of a step forward now. I think the pace might set up pretty well. He's more of a mid-pack type of a horse in this instance, maybe even a little bit more of a closer. This might be an early indication of how well the track plays to closers versus speed in this particular race, because I think there will be a lot of speed up front. This is a horse that absolutely is bred for the distance, and so should have no problem getting the mile at all. But and that's the other thing I kind of like. This horse has run mile and an eighth, mile and a 16th. Now only running a mile. I think this horse has some ability there on the cutback. In terms of my value play, I'm going to take a shot. And this is a barn play more than anything else. And Sarah, I think I've talked to you about this before and talked to others. When Brendan Walsh's barn gets hot, it gets hot. And when it gets cold, be somewhere else. And it gets ice cold. Right now, he is hot. And so I'm going to use the number 10, El Oriente, who is a Chilean horse making his debut in the United States. Tyler Gaffley on aboard. This is a grade 1 stakes horse from down in Chile. And if you look at this horse's running line, 7.5 furlongs in a mile is where this horse does best. And they tried to stretch this horse out the last 2 times out. It didn't go well. Now they come up to North America. They bring it to Brendan Walsh's barn. What does Brendan do? He cuts the horse back to, I think it's naturally right distance. The other thing that I think is worth noting about this horse is practical joke progeny. I mean, this is not a horse that was kind of bred down with other Chilean horses or Latin American horses. This is a horse that was bred with kind of a pretty big name North American horse. Obviously, we've seen with Practical Joke getting a lot of news because of Practical Move, who of course just got scratched out of the Kentucky Derby. But I'm going to take a shot there at 10-1, see what type of horse this is, and just kind of maybe ride the hot hand a little bit in this race. But you have a huge price as your value play for Palo Lobo. So what drew you to Transect?
Just who is this horse? Because they've run him on the synthetic twice, and then they go and take a chance in the Gotham, putting him on dirt for the first time. And he certainly has a dirt pedigree to suggest that he'd be able to handle the surface. But that was a wet track, and the pace completely collapsed in that race. And so I just don't know if he has any dirt ability, and this might be the spot to find out and the price to find out. And that was
Mhm,
mainly what drew me to him because you want to take a horse that has questions at big prices, not at short prices. And
mhm.
if he handles the dirt and picks up a piece at 30-1, I definitely want to use him somewhere because he's just an unknown, frankly. And he
Yep.
had some talent on the synthetic that if it were to transfer to whatever kind of surface he gets at Churchill Downs on Saturday, I know there's a little bit of weather potentially in the forecast, but unlike unlikely to be like the Gotham kind of weather in terms of
Yes.
severity. So perhaps he gets on a track that has a little bit less moisture in it and does appreciate that. And I'm okay with finding out at this price.
Absolutely. If you're going to find out at 30-1. That's the way to go. There also might not be a riderless horse in this race and all sorts of other things that could have, gotten in
You
the
never
way of
know.
Transect. And yeah, hopefully there's not a riderless horse in this race. Hoping it's safe. That Gotham, I just go back and watch that every once in a while and just laugh. That was a bizarre race in so many ways. But definitely like that play. And you're right. Find out who this horse is. And this is something I talked with Chase Sessions about. Horses, he really is using a lot of Oaklawn horses who are coming up. And his argument is they're finally getting on a dry, fast track because it's just been raining all spring and winter down at Oaklawn Park. And it's a logical argument. It is one that led to Defining Purpose running really, really well in the Ashland we saw. So, there's taking that into consideration, looking at the conditions these horses ran under before. And presumably, this is going to be a halfway decent day, maybe a little moisture in the ground, but not much. Well, let's move to the first of the many graded stakes races on the card. Race number 4, the Derby City Distaff. Grade 1 race, 7 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And Sarah, I did not just copy your answers. We indeed ended up on the exact same 2 horses for our top pick and top value play. Listen, this one feels pretty straightforward to me and like one of the safer free spaces and locks on the card. Goodnight Olive. If she was going to lose, I thought she was going to lose last time out when she was coming off the bench for the first time in a long time. 4-5, I know it's really chalky, but she just stands heads and shoulders, it seems like, above the rest of this field. And I just can't make an argument against her.
No, and what has she really done wrong? I mean, she's only finished second once in her entire career. And so winning that grade one Madison, I think, just shows that she is in still the excellent form that she was last year, closing out that campaign with the win in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. And I just really couldn't see past her either. So it feels like the Chalk Fest kind of continues for the first part of this card and then maybe one horse later on. But I know that we both have some interest in Hot and Sultry on the cutback just because she's probably the speed and she
Yep.
has been going longer than she probably wants to against very quality horses in that division such as Secret Oath and Clairiere, and she just makes a lot of sense from the rail, getting a little bit less ground to work with and being the speed from the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And we should say holding her own against those two. I mean, only finished third by like 3.5 lengths last time out in that Apple Blossom, which was just an incredible race. And so it's not as if she was, speed that really faded. I mean, she hung on. I mean, she really was, thought, put out some really gutty efforts the last 2 times out. And if she can do that at going a mile and a 16th, going 7 furlongs, it's going to feel like a, recess for her. So I like Hot and Sultry as well. If you're going to pair these two up, I'll probably just do Ice Cold Exacta 2-1 in this race and try to make at least a little bit of money with a 4-5 horse up top. Well, let's move on to race number 5. And listen, the Chalk Fest continues, my friends, because guess what? When Graham Motion brings Spenderella to the track, that is where my money is always going to go, and it does not matter where she runs. Now, this is your turn to start things off, so I will let you do the love fest over this horse that I know we both really like quite a lot, making her return and debut as a 4-year-old.
She's just so good, and I mean, we
She
saw
is.
her be undefeated in the US so far, run such a gritty effort, finishing 2nd against those top European turf horses, finally getting back to the racetrack now after that Del Mar Oaks, and I just think that she's one of the more logical horses on the card for the entire Derby card, one of the ones that I'm looking forward to watching the most, and I'm running a poll, as we speak of this recording on Twitter of who the likeliest winner is as far as the morning line favorites in some of those Derby Day races, and she's getting no respect. So I think
Yeah.
that her price will at least be fair so far, even though she will be the favorite. And this is a decent field, and even though it's a short field, you have three from the Chad Brown barn and plenty of horses outside of that that aren't nobodies either. But if she brings the form that she's shown before, she should win this race, and I'm really looking forward to what she can do on Saturday.
Yeah, listen, she is so good, to quote you. I mean, she's just I love her to death. I mean, she's just great and undefeated in North America. She's done absolutely nothing wrong, and she's won with ease. I mean, that Del Mar Oaks was just when she pushed the button, it was over. I mean, that was one of the more impressive turn of foots that you're going to see out there, and that was coming back from running at Ascot. So, and that was only like 2 months later. So, I mean, that talking about a lot of travel going from Ascot all the way over to the West Coast and running in that race on 2 weeks' notice, or 2 months' notice, I should say. Really, really impressive. I will say, from a value standpoint, I was really tempted to pick Wakanaka simply because you and I have a history with this horse, as we were one of
I
about
thought you
eight.
would.
I know. I thought I was going to as well. But we were one of about 8 people who stuck around after Flightline impressed at the Breeders' Cup to watch Wakanaka win the Fall Harvest, and I was so thrilled that day that Wakanaka won. But I just think she's kind of up against it, and I'm going with the other Chad Brown horse here with Fluffy Socks, who again just doesn't really turn in bad efforts, and a horse that I just think is coming off a little bit of a layoff, but has traveled all across the country, always turns in an honest effort, may not win a whole lot, but 7 second places and 17 starts. It just feels like this horse hits the board all the time, 13 for 17 in her career. It just feels like a really safe bet to use underneath, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And last time out, she maybe didn't appreciate quite that much distance going a mile and a
Yeah.
quarter. So cutting back slightly. I mean, her effort too back behind technical analysis was one of her better races too. So I think she'll appreciate the slight cutback to a mile. And I think that she's the most likely of the Chad Brown horses because I'm still not sold on Speak of the Devil. And Haughtie's kind of one that had a lot of steam early on and then didn't really live up to that, but yet has kind of come around lately. So of the ones from his barn, this is the one that I wanted to use.
Yeah, same here. Completely agree with your analysis of both Speak of the Devil and Haughty. Haughty, if I was going to use the another one, I would probably use Haughty over Speak of the Devil, but because you're just going to get, I think, a better price too on Haughty, so that's something to consider. But yeah, hard to get around Spenderella in this one, in my opinion. And this is one where, listen, if you're playing horizontals, you can get skinny, I think, a little bit in this sequence, and then really spread in some of these other races, maybe on the beginning and end of these kind of pick five, pick six sequences. But let's move on and let's get away from some of this chalk and let's go to the Knicks Go Stakes, going a mile for 4-year-olds and up. And we are on the same horse up top, but that is not a chalky horse in this case. And it is the horse Masca Parade, who is coming off a little bit of a layoff. Last ran in the Aladar, going back at Saratoga on August 4th. I think this is just a really honest horse that, like I said, it's coming back from a little bit of a layoff, but Albert Stahl Jr. always does a good job getting these horses ready off the layoff. 22% with a 205 ROI for a 180-day plus layoff. Gets the blinkers put on. This horse, when you look at the works, this horse has been working out since February 8th. So this horse is going to be fit and ready for this particular race. Just fired off a 59-3 bullet at Churchill Downs on April 27th. I think this horse, is going to sit a really nice trip behind some of the speed, but shouldn't be too far off the lead. I think it's going to be kind of in a perfect position to pounce later. So I'm going to use this horse at 6-1 with Joel Rosario aboard.
So with this horse, you pointed out a lot of really great reasons to like him. And with him too, I think there was a lot of steam with him going into the Travers. He was really talked about going into that race after the Ohio Derby performance. And he was one of those 3-year-olds that was kind of one of those summer developing horses that we all sort of paid attention to. And so now coming back in this spot, I just think that he's very dangerous at what I think is a fair price down on the inside. And I totally agree with what you said about him being a horse that is likely to be forwardly placed, now adding blinkers for this start too, and having that more inside post position. I just thought that he was a really good alternative to some of the shorter prices that I just don't fully trust as much.
I hear you. And one of those shorter prices is a big favorite of Blaine DeSantis, my father, Baby Yoda, running in this race. I know my dad will be doing a $2 show bet on Baby Yoda because that is all my dad ever bets is $2 show bets. God bless him. And I'm glad he's not engaging on that discourse on horse racing Twitter. But we both, listen, the time of agreement has parted. We finally, after two straight races and another top pick, have finally started to split ways again. You're going after a different value play than me. So talk a little bit about this horse for Dallas Stewart, Promise Keeper, that you like here.
Yeah, I used to be in the Todd Pletcher barn actually, and is making his first start for this barn. He's a Peter Pan winner back in 2021, and he also did run in that Ohio Derby that was won by Mask Parade forever ago. And we haven't seen him since August of last year, where he finished third behind Highly Motivated and Informative, and he didn't have the best of starts in there, stumbling at the break in that race. And I just think that if he is the kind of horse that we saw that he's capable of being back in his previous starts in 2022 and 2021, also now a fresh gelding and coming off the bench. I just thought that he's made some sense underneath somewhere at a price, and never hurts to get Louis Saez in the saddle at a bigger price as well.
Not at all. He is absolutely tearing things up at Churchill Downs early in this meet. And in fact, one of the things I do is, I'll handicap each of these races individually, and then I'll go back and kind of look at the totality of the card. And one of the things I made a note of was I don't think I have Louis Saez enough on my picks, and that's a dangerous place to be in potentially on a big day, especially at Churchill Downs. For my value play, I'm going to go to the number 7 Capuna. And this is a horse that, you mentioned that Masquerade had a little bit of steam. Capuna was a horse that had a little bit of steam as well going into that Louisiana Derby, and then really delivered quite a dud in that effort against Epicenter and Zozos and Pioneer Medina. But the one went to the bench for a while, came back, and has actually run really well since. And I don't know why they ran this horse on the turf last time out. I don't know if it was just to keep the horse fit to some extent, because there's not a lot to suggest this horse should like the turf or it's bred for it. Didn't run a bad effort. Kind of got out in the lead and then faded a little bit late. But I just feel like this is a horse that has some ability and has kind of slowly crept back and improved itself. And if you look, I always talk about improving speed figures. So before that turf effort was going 88, 90, 98. So moving in the right direction, certainly getting on a dry, fast track, presumably on Derby Day, ran on some of those sealed tracks at Oak Lawn Park, and also love the connections with Ray Luke Gutierrez on the mount for Brett Calhoun. So 10-1 on the morning line. I'll use this horse who, like I said, had a little bit of potential, last year on the Derby Trail. Let's move to race number 7 on the card, which, man alive, if this is anything like the Shakertown, this is going to be a heck of a race. The Twin Spires Turf Sprint, grade 2, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And I have a lot of thoughts about the horse that we both selected as our value play, but I'm going to hold off on that because that is a horse that, man, did he live up to his name. But anyway, you went with a horse I absolutely loved 2 years ago in the juvenile turf sprint, coming over from England, Go Bears Go, who now is in Wesley Ward's barn. Talk to me a little bit about this one.
And that's a big thing for him going into this barn for the first time, because when do you see 12 to 1 on a Wesley Ward horse with Johnny V riding in a turf sprint? The
No.
answer is never. And I doubt that we're going to get 12 to 1 just because of those connections and the kind of race that he's going to be running in. And he has solid European form. And while I know that his last race in the Breeders' Cup here was kind of meh, at least we know that he's capable of running in the US back to his Breeders' Cup juvenile effort. And he has that European form to back him up as well, a Group 3 winner over in Ireland. So I just thought that he could be in this barn and improve a little bit. Now, Wesley always gets kind of a lot of speed into these turf sprinters, and that's something that he would benefit from showing a little bit more of. So if he's anywhere near 5, 6, 7 to 1, I'm very interested in him.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit at all. I have a friend of mine on Twitter who's a big European, and he lives over in England, big European fan. He is a huge fan of this horse, and was thrilled to see this horse kind of get a second chance with Wesley Ward over here in the United States. I expect big things from this horse as well. So definitely one I took honestly, this race I was considering like three or four other double digit horses that aren't even on our screen right now. This just feels like a very open race. I mean, even a horse like Oceanic, I thought made a lot of sense potentially as well, who just barely missed out at that Shakertown as well. I ultimately went with Evan Singh as my top choice, 12 to 1 on the morning line for Albert Stall Jr., who we mentioned in the last race, the trainer Masquerade, with Jose Ortiz aboard. And this is a horse that is 3 for 4 at this distance, winning 4 for 4 in the money. Also, one of the things I really liked, got to work over the Churchill Downs turf. We talk so much about this Churchill Downs turf and how unique it is, and how I know David Aragona referred to it as the churf, and it is certainly a very unique thing from last year. It might be a little bit different this year than it was last year, where it just really seemed to favor front end speed all the time. But I do like the fact that this horse got acclimated to that surface, been working out fantastically. Really like that Colonel Power Stakes performance at the fairgrounds, which is another turf course that it leaves a little bit to be desired at times. So was familiar with dealing with that instance, and really came back from a layoff and ran. I just saw a great race that day. Now coming back from just a very short layoff, only about 2 months, I think is really set up to run a pretty nice race here. 12 to 1, you're getting an honest price, and I think there's enough horses in here that are going to attract attention that you're going to probably get a decent price on this horse. But enough of our top pick. Let's talk about our value play. Bad Beat Brian, 15 to 1 on the morning line for Brittany Vandenberg. Talk to me about what drew you to this one.
Oh, so painful last time when
It was
he wasn't able to get by Caravel at what, 42 to 1, I think
41.
it
Yeah.
was.
Oh my
40
God.
something insane. And he just had some form going into that made him competitive and at least worth considering. But to just get beat by the favorite, it's like races like that just make you want to throw things. And I think that now getting into this spot, I mean, he's already surpassed Arrest Me Red before. So
Yep.
if Arrest Me Red is going to be further outside than he is and a much shorter price, I mean, how can you not like Bad Beat Brian other than being so burned from his last race that you don't want to play him again? So I think that you have to use this horse underneath. If he runs anything like his last performance, he's going to be very tough in here.
I totally agree. I was at Aqueduct that day for the Wood Memorial. As you know, I was with my buddies Mark and Greg, or Len and Greg, I should say. And I am one of these people, when I watch a race, I'm usually pretty stoic. I don't really, I don't go into theatrics and scream and holler and shout. I was going nuts screaming at the screen for that race because I had a lot on Bad Beat Brian to win that race. Oh, so close. I mean, talk about a horse living up to his name, but that was painful, but showed so much ability though in that race at such a huge price. And I was just baffled that he was that huge of a price, because I loved him in that last race. I thought he made a ton of sense there, and he showed that. I mean, he proved me right to some extent that he ran his eyeballs out in that race and ran great. So I feel good about including him on some tickets, both vertically and horizontally here for sure in the Twin Spires. Let's move to one of the other signature races on the card, which is, of course, the Pat Day Mile. And this is for 3-year-olds and up, or just 3-year-olds, I should say, going a mile. This is a race, remember, last year, won by Jack Christopher very impressively. That was one of my favorite performances of that day, along with another horse that we'll talk about a little bit later. But my top pick in the Pat Day Mile is a horse that I actually thought was going to be on the Derby Trail, and that is General Jim, number 9 horse, 4 to 1 for Shug McGahee with Luis Saez aboard. This is a horse we have to remember who was scratched out of the Fountain of Youth because he spiked a fever right before the race. He was the second choice on the morning line behind the Breeders' Cup champion and morning line favorite in the Kentucky Derby, Forte. And I think a lot of people, myself included, thought he had a shot in that race, coming off a really impressive swale. Now he's going to be running at that mile, 1 turn mile distance, which I think is just absolutely perfect for him. I think that last race, the swale, was just kind of scratching the surface of what this horse is able to do. You're getting 4 to 1 on the morning line. I don't know what you're necessarily going to get in terms of what it's going to be come post time. This is a huge field, a full 14 horse field as well. So there's a lot of money to be spread around. But I think General Jim's got a lot of class. I think you're only starting to see the best of him. And I think Shug thinks he's got a really good horse on his hands here. And so that's why I'm going to go with him as my top pick. But you went with a horse that I also had taken a long look at, Gun Pilot, for Steve Asmussen.
Yeah, the other Asmussen, right? Because he has Echo again in here too. And I just don't know what to do with Echo again or what to make of
Yeah.
him because he has these breakout solid performances that really make him the horse to beat. And then he has other races that were, I mean, he ran in that one that I believe ended up being a no contest, which
Yeah.
isn't really on his card at all. And a little side note, I feel like they should be when horses run and races are listed as no contest. And then in the Lecomte, he was pulled up in the Springboard Mile at Remington. He really kind of should have won that race and
Yep.
ended up finishing third. And then he has this huge performance again last time at Oaklawn. So I don't really know what to make of him. He can win, but he's not for me at a short price. So I went to a stablemate on the outside who I just thought that he's been facing some solid horses, and he ran a really good race when finishing second in his second start to verifying his best or second
Mm-hmm.
best race so far, verifying now going into the Derby, who finished second in the Bluegrass. So I also liked his last race as well in the Hot Spring Stakes at Oaklawn behind Eye and Clover. And I just think that he needs to possibly get a little bit faster or get back to some of those earlier races. But I think he's a fair price and a player in this spot.
Absolutely. And then you like the horse right next to him as well, who this horse has taken quite a journey from being one of the most precocious and talked about 2-year-olds to becoming a little bit of an afterthought and a huge price in the morning line. Damon's Mound for Michelle Lovell. What drew you to this one coming off a turf effort that I think had a lot of people scratching their heads?
And I don't know why we ran on the turf. Maybe just to get a start under
Yeah.
his belt going into his 3-year-old season, but now going to go back to his preferred surface and run on the dirt with a race under his belt. And if he can get back to that 2-year-old form that we saw in his first two starts, and granted, that's a big if, but if it's possible, he certainly showed a lot of talent. And if he's able to improve off of that now, second off the layoff, getting back to the surface that he's run better on, and not thrown into just a weird race in the Iroquois that I don't think has really held up going forwards. I think that he could make some sense in here at a big price, and this is the time to get in on Damon's Mound because if he runs well in here, he's not going to be a big price again.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And the Iroquois has not held up in recent years very well in general. But you're right. This last year's edition also not particularly strong. I'm going to really throw one downfield with number 14, Freezing Point. This is a horse that ran a great race last time out and at 67 to 1 and ran right behind Corona Bolton Hijazi and was only 3.5 lengths beaten by the two of them. Those are really, really good sprint horses in this 3-year-old division. I mean, two of the best sprint horses, I would say, in this division of 3-year-old males. And was a huge price that day, but this horse is improving. I mean, if you scratch the Battaglia effort going, routing on the Turfway Park synthetic, this horse makes a lot of sense. And this horse broke its maiden going a mile at Churchill Downs. Now coming back, third start on the form cycle, 50 to 1 on the morning line. It just feels like this horse is way better than 50 to 1. I don't know if this horse can hit the board, but I'm willing to include this horse absolutely underneath in like a trifecta for sure. Because if it hits, it's going to pay off nicely, even if you like some shorter prices up top. But this is a horse that does have talent, like I said, and has run behind excellent competition before, has run against horses like Extron Yeho in his debut. And even that effort that he broke his maiden at Churchill Downs has produced 3 next out winners, and 2 of them were stakes placed winners. And after that, so that was a live maiden special weight race that he won coming out of Churchill Downs. So 50 to 1. Hey, we all got to take a shot, and enough of the chalk from earlier in the card. We got to have some long shots to wash it down. So definitely like Freezing Point here a little bit in this one. Let's go to the 9th race on the card with grade 2 American turf going a mile and a 16th on the turf for 3-year-olds. And this is one where this is a stacked field. And I feel like I'm cheating a little bit with my value play because I think everybody knows that's a bad morning line. But This is one where I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your top pick at 10-1 Most Dash for Victoria Oliver first. Certainly coming off a nice win last time out.
He was, and unfortunately, I got off the train last time and had been on it before that when he lost to Talk of the Nation. And look, I mean, he's just going to show early speed, and he also bucked a stat for this trainer that she
Yeah.
doesn't have the best stats in graded stakes races. And I always like to pay attention when horses outrun stats for certain trainers. So he's one that now he's already done it, and you could possibly do it again. And you know that he's going to be forwardly placed at least. He's one that also had that good 2-year-old form to really outrun his 50 to 1 odds in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf
Yep.
Sprint that was won by Victoria Road. So he's faced some classy horses as well and held his own. And I just like his 2 starts as a 3-year-old so far. Thought that he was a decent price at that 10 to 1. And I know that Farbridge is majorly the horse to beat and seriously talented from what we've seen so far from him. But 288 buyers in a row without a progression forwards. It's not that he can't do it, but do I really want to take 7 to 2 on a horse that hasn't really improved when other horses have been stakes faced, have been facing tougher company, and have been running faster numbers? He might just be supremely talented and move forward off that effort, but he's one that I'm going to try to beat in this spot.
Yeah, listen, I feel like both he and Carl Spackler, Farbridge that is, and Carl Spackler kind of fit the same MO. These are two supremely talented, very untested young horses on the turf. Farbridge, of course, getting the better of Carl Spackler on debut in their maiden. Then Carl Spackler coming back, winning that maiden next time out, running a 92 buyer speed figure. Farbridge, like you said, plateaued, ran an 88 buyer again and winning an allowance optional claiming race down at Gulfstream Park. And there's been a little bit of drama with this horse going from the Christophe Clement barn to the Todd Pletcher barn. There's been ownership changes as well. And so it's been a lot of things going on with this particular horse. But I'm just going to, there are certain times when I see a horse's running lines and I see Joel Rosario as a board, I just get excited because when I see a deep closer and I see Joel aboard, and it seems like Joel's timing is back after what we've seen at Oaklawn the last couple of weeks, he seems to have figured out the funk that he was in. This is a horse that could deliver a really dazzling run. I have a feeling, and Joel's the only jockey that I would really trust coming from the back and dealing with all the potential traffic that he might have to deal with in this huge of a field, and somehow, like a wizard, finding his way to the finish line first. But certainly is a risky proposition at 7 to 2 for a horse that, like you said, does have some question marks still there. I am using the cheat code here in terms of my value play with Talk of the Nation. Listen, this is a horse that should not be 10 to 1 on the morning line, will not be 10 to 1 come post time. This is a horse that will be bet down to, if we get 5 to 1, we'll be thrilled. For Shug McGahee and Tyler Gaffleone, just super talented horse, and love that Tyler gets aboard. Granted, maybe you sit there and go, the race is at Tampa. It's Tampa. This horse, listen, speed is speed and talent is talent. And that's pretty obvious no matter where you run. And this horse seems to have it. Also, I have to give a little bit of a wag of the finger to the DRF, who in the notes said, this horse is a tough cookie at Tampa, but this is not the East Coast of Florida anymore. Hey, DRF, Tampa is not the East Coast of Florida. That would be Daytona Beach. That's the East Coast of Florida. Tampa is the West Coast of Florida. So if you're going to make fun of a horse, at least get your geography right. So that would be my notes to DRF on that one. But that's where I'm going to go for my value play. Like I said, he'll get bet down, but I'll be using him in a lot of different sequences. But you went with a legit value play, number 10, Ottago, who ought to go on your ticket, apparently, for Kelsey Danner. Tell me a little bit about this one.
Well, before I get to him, just poor Talk of the Nation. No one can get his morning line right. Nobody can get his location right. I mean, this poor guy.
He gets no
But
respect. It's a Rodney
I
Dangerfield type
know,
of
I
horse.
know. Don't worry, he'll get his respect when the wagering opens for this
Oh, yeah.
race. But with Otago, I liked him going into his last or his start two back actually when he lost to General Jim, who we're going to see
Mhm.
earlier on in the card. And to be perfectly honest with you, looking back, I was like, why did I like him? I don't even remember. But I bet a couple dollars on him next time out in his last race, and he won at 12 to 1, and it reaffirmed whatever it is that I saw that one time when I did like him. And one day I'll figure out exactly what that was, and I go back in my notes and look at that. But he's one that I liked something, and he was able to run really well last time, beating
Hmm.
Boppy O, who's a horse that we've seen have
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
success in turf stakes races before. So this is a reach, but this is a fun, wide open field with a lot of horses, and he might just be moving in the right direction now, and you're going to get a huge price.
Yeah, you're absolutely going to get a huge price. And I'll give one other, I think, huge price that might even float up a little bit from the morning line, which is the number 5, Johannes, at 15-1 for Tim Yakteen with Umberto Rispoli aboard. Typically, I fade West Coast turf horses coming to the Midwest. This horse looks like, he's got the goods, and it looks like he just needed a surface switch. He's won sprinting, going on the downhill, and routing out on the turf at Santa Anita. That's not a very easy trifecta to hit out there to show that sort of versatility. 15-1, like I said, a lot of people try to fade those types of horses. Son of Nyquist, again, the pedigree is not necessarily there to suggest turf, but this horse seems to have really taken to it. So you're going to get a huge price on that type of a horse. That was one that I was also looking at in terms of a legit value play for that particular race. Let's take move on to the 10th race on the card, which is the Churchill Downs Stakes. And this is a grade one going 7 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And listen, when it was at the Breeders' Cup, I made a very impassioned argument against Cody's Wish. And then I watched the human interest story about the horse, and I felt like a complete jerk for betting against Cody's Wish because it is one of the most heartwarming stories that you will find in all of horse racing, and truly, truly a wonderful story that really touches, I think, anyone to know about. But this is also a horse that is just incredibly talented and is both of our top picks. This is a horse that is a perfect 4-for-4 winning at Churchill Downs. I think, coming back from the layoff, going 7 furlongs, makes a lot of sense. Is another short price, I know, but this is one where I just can't get around this 4-5 favorite.
Me either. And I mean, he just has so many credentials coming into this race, and you're always rooting for him on in your heart rather than in your with your wagering dollars, because this is just such a great story about Cody Dorman, who was able to have that connection with him when he was a foal, and great that Godolphin was able to name this horse after him. Just such a sweet story, and gets you all in the fields going
Yep.
into
Yep.
Breeders' Cup and now coming back on the Kentucky Derby undercard. But while neither of us are trying to beat him, I mean, you know who really likes to finish second, going 7 furlongs at a giant price, or even third? It's Hoist the Gold. And he's one that I just absolutely love to always show up for a piece of things at a giant price. And he's kind of like my new running son of a gun, because
Yep.
everybody figured out that running son of a gun could run. And now he's not a big price anymore. So I'm done with him. Hoist the Gold somehow always goes off at a giant price still. I mean, he was third in the Malibu. He finished second to Gunite at a huge price a couple of times. And I just don't know why he never gets any respect, especially at this distance, too, because he's just always right there. So you're taking the horse that beat him last time, however. It's one of these two that you absolutely want to use underneath Cody's Wish, because they always seem to show up at giant prices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to laugh when I looked at this card. You send me your picks a little bit before the show, but we both handicap separately and we don't know who we're picking until we kind of come on the show and take a look at things. But when I looked at this one, I purposely said, I'm not picking Hoist the Gold as my value play because I know Sarah will pick that horse. And that was when I just knew that was your free square for this race value play. And yeah, Hear My Song is basically the same argument. This is a horse that's just really honest. I have no idea why this horse is at 30-1 and why Hoist the Gold's at 30-1. And yet the horse that they both beat last time out, Get Her Number, is at 12-1. And this just feels like a bad morning line again, in which might get bet down. But when you're starting at 30-1, there's a lot of room to move and you're still going to get a value. Listen, the trainer here, Will Stinson, has success at Churchill Downs, 22% win rate at Churchill. So he's definitely come in and won races here. Granted, that was at some lower level races. Excuse me. But, this is definitely a big spot. 3-for-4 in the exacta at Churchill Downs and 3-for-4 in the exacta at this distance. 12-for-19 in the exacta in this horse's career. This horse just makes a lot of sense. And especially when you scratch the turf weight form recently, when this horse is on the dirt, this horse just wins or finishes second, it seems like, almost every single time out. So I'm going to be using that one. But I agree with you. You got to use the 3 and 4 under here of Cody's Wish in the Churchill Downs Stakes. Let's move to the race right before the Kentucky Derby, and then there'll be an hour and a half in between this race and the Kentucky Derby, and that's not hyperbole. That really is going to be an hour and a half. And we'll go to the Turf Classic, Grade One, going a mile and an eighth for 4-year-olds and up. And this was a race last year that made Matthew money because of a little horse I like to call Santon, and got me the name Matthew DeSanton. But we both like the same horse in this particular race for Todd Pletcher, who's coming out of the Grade One Maker's Mark Mile. Up to the mark. Sarah, what led you to this one?
Well, it's certainly not a disgrace to finish third behind Modern Games and Ches Pierre in that race that he was in last time in that Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland. And that was, he hasn't been running on the turf for that long. He just made his turf debut earlier this year at Gulfstream. And honestly, that was probably his most eye-catching turf performance so far. And as Peter Aiello so accurately called it going into the turn, you saw him moving, and you know that whoever you had that wasn't him, you were in deep trouble because he was just making such an impressive move on the turn in that race and drew away pretty convincingly in there. Backed that up with another win on the grass, and then went right into the stakes waters and really held his own. And I just think
Yeah.
that 4-1, okay. I mean, maybe Hong Kong Harry does take a little money for the Phil D'Amato barn, currently your morning line favorite, but it seems like the line is fairly open for this race, and it seems like the lines through a lot of this card, as we've already alluded to, perhaps not the most accurate ones that we've ever seen before. And look, I don't want to do that job, and I know
No.
that I wouldn't be good at it, but at the same time, I'm so spoiled by the New York Racing Association circuit with David Aragona
Yeah.
as our morning line maker because I at least have an idea of what kind of prices I'm going to get on my horses when I pick them. And when I handicap other racetracks, it's like, well, I really like this horse, but they could probably be the favorite. Or I really
Hmm.
like this horse and maybe they'll take no money at all and it's for a good reason. And so you're kind of a little bit more in the dark when you go through other racetracks because you don't really know what you're going to get, especially with the addition of more computer automated wagering being
Yeah.
allowed up until the last minute. And I'll step off my soapbox about that now, but it's like, are we really going to get 4-1? I don't know. And so, is this really a horse that I want to bet at 4-1? Do I really want to take him if he's the favorite? Maybe not. So, at this price or around this price, I think that he makes a lot of sense, but I don't know that I want him much shorter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. I kind of hope Hong Kong Harry takes a little bit of money as well. I hope a horse, even like Santon, takes some money who's in this race. I just don't think Santon's in nearly as good a form, but I think people might just go, oh, this horse likes the Churchill Down turf, and we're going to play this horse coming back. Oh, the last year's winner. Usually there's that sort of residual effect sometimes at the betting windows. So you never know. But yeah, I wouldn't want to take too short of a price on up to the mark. I was very, very impressed by that Maker's Mark Mile, to be able to hang with Modern Games. Almost, I mean, just lost by a neck to Modern Games, or lost, but finished third by a neck to Modern Games second place. Uh, my value play in this one is not much of a value, but again, that speaks to I don't know where this price is going to go on this horse, and that's the number 9 Spooky Channel. I could see this horse floating up because of the money that other horses are going to attract, but this is just, I think, a really cool horse who took like well over a year off from October 21 to December 22, and then has come back and won a stakes race, finished third by a length in a grade 3, and won a grade 2. And we've seen a really big speed figure last time out for trainer Jason Barkley. He gets Joel Rosario aboard. The running style should fit Rosario well in this particular race. Like I said, I don't know what price you're necessarily going to get on Spooky Channel, but this feels like a horse that kind of has found a second career now in Barkley's barn. And I'm willing to give this horse a shot, especially because I feel like this horse is going to be closer to like 7-1 come post time or something around there. But you went with a horse that I think is a pretty cool one. And I know where he's going to be in the race, which is up on the front end, which is Wolfie's Ghost.
Yeah, and he kind of is that synthetic horse, right? More so than
Yeah.
a turf horse. But I want him now having those two good races over the synthetic at Gulfstream this year so far and earning his first triple digit buyer. I just wonder if maybe he appreciates this added distance a little bit more too, since he hasn't had the ability to go further than the mile and a 16th on the turf. And his race that he won in his last turf start was actually going a little bit further than the mile in that mile and 16th race. So I just wonder with him, can he replicate that form going a little bit further on the grass? And if so, he's absolutely a horse that I want to use, especially anywhere near that 10 to 1 price too, because if it is just a matter of a little bit more distance for him, I think that that's worth finding out about.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And yeah, this horse has shown a lot of talent and flashed a lot of ability. So worth taking a shot, certainly at 10 to 1. But without any further ado, we get to the race that you all are probably tuning in for. And maybe you just skipped to this part of the video just to get to it. But race number 12, the Grade 1 Kentucky Derby, the first gem in the Triple Crown, mile and a quarter for 3-year-olds. Sara, because I know this, we go back and forth with this, but because you're the guest, I'll let you take first here. But as of the time of recording this, because I feel like this is very necessary, we are recording this Thursday evening. There have been 3 horses that have already officially been scratched from the race. Practical Move, as well as Lord Miles, and then Continue R. Those 3 horses are all officially out of the race. In their place at this point is Cyclone Mischief, Mandarin Hero, who finished second in the Santa Anita Derby, the horse from Japan that came over, and then King Russell, who finished second in the Arkansas Derby. There are rumors and speculations that Forte, the morning line favorite, may scratch. Those are yet unconfirmed at this point, but it is looking increasingly likely that that may happen, and that news may be announced on Friday morning. There has been other scuttlebutt around about a few other horses potentially scratching. So if that happens, there are no other also eligibles. The field will only get smaller with any additional scratches. With all of those things being said, and all those disclaimers being put in place, we don't have any of these horses that were scratched on our list here, but you do. You have actually one of the horses that drew into this race as a value play. But talk to me about your top pick, who you have been on for quite a while.
How many horses have to scratch for me to run? That's what I want to know. Probably all of them. Yeah, Confidence Game is just one that I really liked as a 2-year-old. And looking at a race like the Kentucky Derby, I want a horse that I've been a fan of and been impressed by this entire time, right? You want a horse that you've really come to be fond of and you're a
Mhm.
fan of and that you've been cheering for the whole time. Maybe one that you've made some money with, but one that you just have a lot of confidence in, no pun intended. And for me, this crop of 3-year-olds, I don't love anybody
Yeah.
except for Confidence Game. And so I know there's a lot of concern about the gap in time from his Rebel win up until the Kentucky Derby, them opting not to run in a race like the Arkansas Derby or the Louisiana Derby, or even try to go the Gulfstream route and go face Forte in the Florida Derby, and then the Lexington coming up with such short notice right before the Kentucky Derby. That I can understand not wanting to rush into a race right before one of the biggest races of his career ever, considering if he goes forward or not and does run in all 3 of those Triple Crown races. So I get why their hands were probably kind of tied in not really finding something that worked timing wise for him. And hey, he already had the points. So might as
Yep.
well just train up to the race and have a fresh horse if you're going to run in all 3. And he's been working extremely well and catching the eye of a lot of people in the morning. He also has a horse that can be forwardly placed in a race where the pace scenario is kind of fuzzy. At least we think that, the Japanese horse Derma Sorogake is going to be one that goes early. And there's a couple other horses that can be forward, but nobody is really that confirmed front runner. I think it'll just depend on what happens as everybody gets out of the gate, stares around at each other, and somebody makes a plan. And I think that he's going to go from a further inside post and with the speed that he's been able to show before, but he also doesn't have to. He can sit mid pack or even close if the pace necessitates that happening. And I also don't think that he's only an off track horse. He's run against some decent horses and run good races, barring that one Iroquois effort
Yeah.
going into this race before. So he just ticks a lot of the boxes for me going into this race. And if I like everything about him, including the price, outside of that gap of time, and I don't like a lot of things about other horses at much shorter prices, I
Mhm.
can't not stick with him. And so that's kind of my argument for continuing on the bandwagon for Confidence Game.
I think is a compelling argument. It's one that you have been convincing me of for a little while, and I'll be honest, I've come to really get a lot closer to liking this horse, and this is a horse I absolutely am going to be including on my tickets because I think there is something to be said. And you mentioned as well, this is a horse that's been turning heads at Churchill Downs during those morning workouts. The 8 furlong, you almost never see that, almost replication of a race. And then the 5 furlong bullet right before the race, I think a 59 flat, 5 furlong work. I mean, just super impressive and just looked really great doing it. Um, I think Keith DeSormo might be crazy like a fox, and I think he might just have an idea of what this horse needs to do. James Graham, beautiful ride in that Rebel. I mean, that's one of the just a great job calming that horse down and moving that horse outside, winning from off the pace, which showed a little bit of a new dimension. Um, I largely agree with you in terms of your assessment of this 3-year-old crop. I don't necessarily love any of these horses. If people who followed me for a while, last year I was all on the simplification bandwagon, and still am, sadly. And so this is a race this year where I don't have a bandwagon horse that I'm necessarily on, but it's a horse that I have come to like and appreciate a little bit more because of its humble beginnings, and that is Angel of Empire, who broke his maiden at Horseshoe Indianapolis and was kind of not a very well thought of Brad Cox horse, whereas all these other Cox horses were getting a lot of pub early in the Derby prep season. And all Angel of Empire has done is progressively get better and stretch out and go longer every single time. And it seems like this horse just wants more and more and more distance and gets better the longer this horse goes. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Flavian Pratt, the jockey, seemed to have a choice between King's Barnes and Angel of Empire. And he took about 0.2 seconds to make that decision before deciding to go on Angel of Empire over King's Barnes, who's a very good horse in 12-1 on the morning line and is a perfect 3 for 3. So it wasn't like he was choosing between an also eligible horse and an Angel of Empire. I mean, he was choosing between essentially the fifth choice in the race. So I really, like I said, like this horse a lot. Pennsylvania bred, I guess that's a connection to me because I grew up in Pennsylvania. And I just think this horse showed a lot of class winning at 2 different circuits, winning the Risen Star at the fairgrounds and then going up and really blowing out the field, which included horses in the Kentucky Derby like King Russell, Reincarnate, and Rocket Can, and just easily going by them in the Arkansas Derby, winning by 4.5 lengths that day. You're right that the pace scenario is very muddled. It does seem like it keeps getting a little bit faster every time I look at it. I think the drawing in of Cyclone Mischief means that's a horse that's probably going to want to be pretty forward. I think verifying from the inside, Jace's Road, King's Barnes, Reincarnate. These are all Dermasotogake, who you mentioned. I think all these horses are going to want to be forward. It's the Derby. It always leads to a fast pace. And this leads me to my value play. And honestly, yours a little bit as another horse I really like a lot. But Skinner is mine at 20-1 on the morning line for Juan Hernandez, the John Sheriff's horse, who finished third at the Santa Anita Derby behind your value play Mandarin Hero. But this is a horse that is a dead closer, has great late speed. If there is going to be that pace meltdown, horses may not like that 1.25 mile distance. Skinner is absolutely going to love every inch of that 1.25 mile distance. This is a horse that should get stronger. And this is a horse that was running on Santa Anita's speed favoring surface. That is not a surface that is typically kind to closers. Now you get to Churchill Downs, should be a little bit more of a fair track. I'll use a horse like Skinner, who has become a totally different horse at 3 than he was at 2, and has really kind of blossomed into his own, a little bit like Angel of Empire in that regard. And so I'll go with these two kind of late bloomers to some extent as my top pick and value play. But talk to me about a horse that I'm super excited about for both the horse and as well as for the connections, Mandarin Hero.
Yeah, I think we both have a lot of respect for Practical Move, who won't be playing as we took the 2 horses that finished behind him. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Mandarin Hero run. And he's one that was on my watch list, on that also eligible list, just like hoping that he would somehow get into this race. And of course, you never want to see horses come out of a big race like this. And, obviously hoping that everybody ends up being okay. But glad that he gets his shot to run because he's one that impressed more than some others on the Derby Trail and in those prep races. And two, finishing just a nose behind Practical Move in his first start in the US, taking kickback, getting a serious education out of that race. I just think that
Mhm.
he can really move forward off of that effort. And I know each year we keep saying it's only a matter of time until Japanese breeding and racing really takes over in America as asserting themselves as a global force. And they already have, but it's only a matter of time until they win their first Kentucky Derby, and now having 2 horses with Continuar scratching, in this year's event, I think Mandarin Hero is a really strong part of that contingent, and you're going to get a better price on him than Derma Sotogake. Now, he is drawn very far outside, but I think that he'll just drop back, save some
Yep.
ground, and come with that closing run. And he interests me as a horse that I think is very talented.
Yeah, I agree with your analysis. I don't think the outside's going to kill him in that regard. He's just going to come straight inside, I think, pretty quickly, and just understand you're coming from the back in this particular race. Kazushi Kimura's had a bunch of really good success out there in Santa Anita already, coming up from that Woodbine circuit on the jockeys room out to Santa Anita now at Churchill Downs. Listen, this is, I feel like a very wide open race, though. I mean, this is a wide open field of 3-year-olds. There's nobody I absolutely love. Even before the news about Forte potentially scratching, I was going to be playing against him. I am going to be playing against Tapit Trice, a horse I just do not trust on the inside. I don't think that horse wants any part of the kickback it's going to get breaking from the number 5 pole. Saez is going to want to get this horse angled outside, and I just don't see it happening. I just don't think he gets the right trip. I'm worried about Derma getting burned up maybe on the front end now that there's a little bit more speed. That was a horse I really, really liked early on looking at things when the pace scenario was a little bit slower. It seemed like a horse that just keeps coming up in my head is Kings Barnes. I just think that horse might be sitting on a really good effort for some reason and should be out of trouble and pretty forwardly placed, but not necessarily on the lead. But this one's wide open, and get yourself a price, ladies and gentlemen. Get yourself a price in this year's Kentucky Derby. That is for sure. But listen, that's not the end of the card. We still got to hit a daily double here on the back end. We got races 13 and 14. And Sarah, you asked me, are we capping the whole thing? I said, we're capping the whole thing. So we got to go here to race 13. What a letdown after the Kentucky Derby. But we go to a $100,000 allowance optional claim. We're going a mile and 16th for 3-year-olds. And it features some horses that were on the Derby trail at one point or kind of were around it a little bit. Talk to me about your top pick, Bo Cruz, at 5-1 on the morning line.
I just love seeing a progression from first start to second start. And this horse really moved forward in terms of buyer speed figures from that first race, finishing second
Mhm.
to winning, getting that 93 last time out, which makes this one at 5-1 because we know the two equivocate is going to take some serious money in this spot and deservingly so, but also has to handle the added distance. I just thought that this one has at least shown that he can improve and he can go a little bit further unlike your favorite. So that was really it for me with this horse. And I feel like it's not that often that you see trainer Alstall at such a short price as he was in both of this horse's two starts. So I think the betting public also trusted this horse's ability too.
Yeah, I was torn between Equivoque and Bo Cruz. I ended up landing on Equivoque, who is going to get bet down from 3-1 inevitably as my top pick. Super impressive on debut and has the pedigree to suggest stretching out will not be a problem. Progeny of Good Magic, who of course is a progeny of Curlin as well. Dam out of Giant Causeway. I mean, should be able to handle the distance without a problem, and stretching out shouldn't be an issue. Pletcher's actually 31% with debut winners next time out routing. So that gives me some confidence that this, and Pletcher also known as a trainer that is very good at getting horses to stretch out, particularly younger horses stretching out. So I'm going to go with the favorite here, Equivoque, in race number 13. But we both like a horse whose name, come on, if you're a horse racing fan, there's only one true horse racing movie because it's not even really about horse racing as much as about gambling. Let It Ride. This is a great name and a really cool horse for George Weaver and Jose Ortiz.
And he has to get a little bit faster, but it's certainly a possibility. Now going the furthest that he's gone so far at this mile and 16th distance off of the 7 furlong effort where he finished second and then winning at the mile at an extremely short price. And I know that he doesn't stack up figures wise in comparison to some of your shorter prices towards the inside, but it seems like there's a little bit of buzz about him and he can certainly improve third time out. So I think 12-1 is a fairly generous price on him if we get it.
Yeah, I agree that it's a generous price, and the pedigree would suggest he can stretch out fine. Candy right up top, damn out of Pioneer of the Nile. And also, we should point out that maiden race that he finished second into Scotland, who's a horse I really liked a lot. That that race produced 3 next out winners. I mean, that was a pretty live maiden special weight race down at Gulfstream Park. So came back. He was one of those 3 that came back to win, going a little bit longer at a mile at Aqueduct. So that's where we go in race 13. And let's close out the card in race number 14. and we are going 100. We're not going 100. We're going to pay $120,000 for maiden special weight here, going 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds and up. And listen, if I like Equivoque in the last race, I better like the number 9 Mulligan in this race, because that's the horse that he beat last time out, and that is ultimately where I went with my top selection. Mulligan 4-1 on the morning line for Rudy Brissett with Flavien Prat aboard. I was just really impressed by obviously that debut, or not that debut, that second effort. This is a horse that's finished twice, first 2 times out. Maybe you suggest this horse hangs a little bit, but the horse actually has done it in 2 different ways. In debut, kind of broke pretty slow, came from well off the pace and just missed out on winning. Second time out, breaks from the inside rail, always a tough spot to be in a sprint race, and really flashes a lot of speed that day, just barely fades down and gets beat by Equivoque. And so that was one of those where I'm not going to hold those 2 second places against him. The horse has shown talent, increased by her speed figures. I think we'll take another step forward and get the job done here. But you like a first-time starter for Cherie DeVoe, one of my favorite trainers, 12-1 for Northern Invader. What drew you to this one?
The workouts are decent for this horse, and I feel as though Sharito doesn't often win with her first time starters, but a lot of them really run well hitting the board at
Mm-hmm.
decent prices. And I looked at the morning line and I was going to put Golden Sombrero on top, but then I just realized that he was a bigger price. And so I was like, all right, well, then Northern Invader on top it is, and Golden Sombrero second. And if they were reversed in the prices, that's how it would appear
Yeah.
on the screen there. So that was really just the reasoning for putting this one on top. And I think the main point of this race is that we're both trying to beat Brad Cox with Ever So Mischievous, who was bet down like he couldn't lose on debut and then got run down by a horse that was a private purchase out of a Tampa race, who then did regress next time out in Toxic Gray. And they put on a show. I was out watching
Yep.
that race and he barely got beat, but they were well clear of the rest of the field. So I just wondered, what did that race take out of him? Because we have seen Toxic Gray come back since a couple times, and we haven't seen him since. So he's one that he can win, but I don't really want to take him after he really was bet like he could not lose his first race and got run
Yeah.
down by kind of an outsider looking horse in that spot who then hasn't exactly held up the same number that he ran in that debut of Ever So Mischievous's. So
Yeah.
he's just one that I kind of want to try to get around in this final race on this 14 race card.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I remember that race quite vividly, and you're right. They were 12 and a half lengths clear of everybody else that day. But another point is, Ever So Mischievous, that's a horse that I also am not a big fan of. I mean, Cox rarely debuts his best horses up in Aqueduct, and this was a horse that was only an $85,000 purchase at the Keeneland November sales. I mean, it was bizarre that this horse was bet like it couldn't lose, and yet there was a lot of things pointing to it, saying, I don't know if this horse really is going to fire first time out. And now you're right, hasn't been seen since that race. Now comes back in, I think, a pretty tough spot here. But we both like Golden Sombrero, and who won with that name? But the number 5 horse here for Doug O'Neill with Jose Ortiz aboard, finally got on the dirt last time out after running in a stakes race in his debut on the turf at the Baffle. And I know it was a maiden optional claimer, but ran a heck of a race and posted an 84 buyer speed figure, and certainly 15-1 presents a little bit of value here.
Right, and a replication of that race that was on the dirt for the first time with this like cutback and an improvement from the first turf start as well. I think 15-1 is certainly generous, and I get that all the money will likely go to that Brad Cox horse that we're trying to beat. But if we get anywhere near 15-1 on Golden Sombrero, I will honestly be a little bit surprised because he just makes a lot of sense being more lightly raced and having shown that improvement on the dirt.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me for all 14 races on the Kentucky Derby Day card. I really appreciate it. Now, how are you going to be spending Kentucky Derby Day, and what does NYRA have lined up on that day? Because you got some big races up at Belmont now, because you're starting, and that's an exciting time to be moving into the new track.
Yeah, definitely. And especially getting that budget proposal approved that we have going on with that multi-million dollar loan to renovate Belmont Park is it's an extremely exciting time, and they're going to put a lot of work into that, but just great to be working there for the first time myself. I've only been as a fan so far, so now I'm seeing all kinds of parts of the racetrack that you would never imagine that you would see, including the basement and the wonky elevators and all kinds of crazy stuff going on over at Belmont. But I got to watch the first race of the meet today, which was very cool, seeing those 2-year-olds come out. So we have a lot of great racing going on. But we are on air from 10:30 in the morning on Kentucky Derby Day, and we are covering the first 4 races from Churchill, then going through our card, a little bit of Oaklawn sprinkled in there as well. So lots of action going on. If you need to take a break and recoup from the Kentucky Derby card, you can head on over to Belmont Park.
Absolutely. Please make sure to do that, folks. And thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Make sure to press that subscribe button for all of the horse racing content you need, whether it's about the Kentucky Derby, graded stakes races, international races, live betting, the rest of the Triple Crown. We got you covered, folks. Make sure to throw both of us a follow. Myself at Fail to Menace, Sarah, Outrun the Odds. And until next time, friends, I wish you a great day at the races and a very, very profitable day at the races. And remind you that it's now post time.